Hello all, I am Gitanjali Nikam and I extend
A very warm welcome to all my fellow legal aspirants. I hope you all are doing well at home. Many of us, while studying jurisprudence, struggle with numerous doubts. So, I am here with this video trying to at least clear some of your doubts. The topic that will be covered in this video is liability, with the special reference given to strict liability and vicarious liability. Now, the topic that will be covered under the liability are kinds of liability, strict liability, case laws related to strict liability, vicarious liability, and case laws related to vicarious liability. Now, what is the meaning of term liability? In a general meaning, the term liability is related to the word wrong. A breach of rights and duties is called wrong, and a person who commits a wrong is said to be liable for it, and there and then the liability arises and the person will either have to pay for the wrong he has committed or he will be punished for the wrong he has committed. So a man's liability consists in those things which he must do or suffer because he has failed to do what he ought to have done, which implies that a liability arises from a breach of duty, which may be in the form of an act or omission. If he commits a wrongful act, he is liable, and if he does not do or perform his duty which he is ought to perform, then also he will be liable. Now, before jumping directly to the concept of vicarious liability and strict liability, there are different four kinds of liability which has been categorized by Salmon. They are civil liability, criminal liability, remedial liability, and penal liability. Civil and criminal liability are very easy to understand. Civil liability it consists in the enforcement of right of plaintiff against the defendant in civil proceedings. When a person commits civil liability, he has to pay the amount of compensation against who has he committed the crime. And in criminal liability, he commits a crime or a wrong which is against the society, and he gets the punishment. And in penal liability, the wrongdoer is punished. Penal liability can come under the criminal liability, and it is related to the maxim actus non facit nisi mens sit rea, which applies that act does not amount to crime unless it is accompanied by the guilty mind. The two elements that can be included in penal liability are act and guilty mind. They are both essential requirements to constitute a crime. And lastly, the remedial liability. The maxim associated with remedial liability is ubi jus ibi remedium, which we all know that where there is right, there must be a remedy. The purpose of remedial liability is to protect the right of plaintiff rather than punishing the wrongdoer. As we can see that Salmon and Austin have given their definition. Salmon defines liability as vinculum juris, which means a bond of necessity that exists between the wrongdoer and the remedy of wrong. According to Austin, those certain forbearances, commission of acts, together with such of their consequences as it was the purpose of the duties to award, are imputable. The persons who have forborne, omitted, or acted is styled as imputability. Kinds of liability, as we have discussed: civil, criminal, remedial and penal. We are further going to discuss the strict liability and vicarious liability a moment later. Civil liability. The civil liability contains two maxims: damnum sine injuria and injuria sine damnum, which we have already studied in tort. Damnum sine injuria means where a wrongdoer commits a liability where there is no legal injury is caused. In injuria sine damnum, a civil injury is caused, but though the act may not be harmful. A civil injury is caused, but the act caused is not harmful. As we have studied that civil liability includes payment of amount of compensation. Criminal liability. The main elements of criminal liability are act and mens rea or guilty mind. Mens rea is mental element necessary for the particular crime. Remedial liability. The maxim related is ubi jus ibi remedium, where there is right, there must be a remedy. Penal liability. Actus non facit reum nisi mens sit rea, which means that act does not amount to crime unless it is accompanied by guilty mind. It is also associated with the criminal liability. Now, the main purpose of this video is to make you people understand what is the meaning of strict liability and vicarious liability. Generally, the person who commits crime is only liable for his negligence, which results into harm or violation of rights of the others. But there are certain cases, even when the person is not intentional or negligent to commit a crime, he is liable of irrespectiveness of negligence or carefulness. Such cases are covered under the rule of strict liability, which is also known as absolute liability. Absolute liability or absolute duty can be defined as a duty which a person is liable without any fault of his and irrespective of any consideration of intention of negligence on his part, which means that a person should fulfill the duty he is bound to fulfill. The doctrine of strict liability is also applicable in the cases involving wild animals, dangerous premises or substances, electricity, water, fire, explosive. So, as we can see that wild animals, dangerous premises, fire, explosive involves taking of utmost care while involving such kinds of elements in a duty. So Salmond has grouped cases of strict liability under the following three heads: mistake of fact, mistake of law and inevitable accident. Let's understand what are these. Mistake of law. The maxim related to mistake of law is ignorantia juris meminam excusat, which clearly implies that ignorance of law is no excuse in all legal system. If a person ignores a law while fulfilling his duty, he is said to be liable, and the court will not accept that he was not aware of the law. Mistake of fact. Mistake of fact is a good defense in the law of crimes. The mistake, in order to qualify for exemption from criminal liability, should fulfill two conditions. It should be reasonable and it should be mistake of fact and not mistake of law. Inevitable accidents are those accidents which are not possible to avoid. That is, it must be a physically unavoidable in nature. Inevitable accident is commonly recognized as a ground of exemption from both in civil and criminal cases. So here is a very famous case of Raylands versus Fletcher in 1868. Let's understand what is this case all about. So let's read. In this case, the defendant got a reservoir constructed through independent contractors over his land, providing water to his mill. There were old disused shafts under the site of the reservoir, which the contractors failed to observe and so did not block them. When the water was filled in the reservoir, it burst through the shaft and flooded the plaintiff's coal mines on the adjoining land. The defendant did not know of the shafts and had not been negligent through the independent contractors had been. Even though the defendant has not been negligent, he was liable. Let's understand this through a diagram. As we can see, on the right hand side, Fletcher's flooded mine, and on the left hand side, water reservoir which Rayland got built for his mill, and we can see the shafts and the coal mine. So the water reservoir burst and it got poured into the shafts which were left uncovered. Here the mistake was of independent contractors and not mistake of Fletcher. So what did the court held? The court held that the person who for his own purpose brings on his land and keeps there anything likely to do mischief if it escapes. In this land, the Fletcher must be careful, the Raylands must be careful of the independent contractors, and he must have taken care of them as of what work they are doing. So, and if he does not do so, is prima facie answerable for all the damage which is the natural consequence of its escape. He can excuse himself by showing that the escape was owing to the plaintiff's default, or perhaps that the escape was the consequence of his nature or act of God. But as we can see that nothing of such kind happens here. It was clearly the negligence of the defendant. So, for the application of strict liability, the following three essentials should be there. Some dangerous thing must have been brought by a person on his land. So the negligence which caused by the defendant was the dangerous things of the independent contractors, and the thing brought or kept by a person on his land must escape and must move to the land of plaintiff. In this case, the reservoir got burst out and got poured into the uncovered shafts. And the third one is it must be non-natural use of land. In India also such kind of incident happened. Most of you might be aware of the leakage of MIC gas from the Union Carbide plant in Bhopal in 1887, where more than 3,000 people had died and lakhs of others were subjected to serious disease of various kinds. And a year earlier in Delhi, at Shriram Foods and Fertilizer Industry, on 4th and 8th December, the same kind of incident of leakage of oleum gas happened. So MC Mehta filed a case, and from that case, the Supreme Court evolved a new rule creating an absolute liability for the harm caused by dangerous substances. The court held that the enterprise must be held to be under an obligation to provide that the hazardous or inherently dangerous activity in which it is engaged must be conducted with the highest standards of safety. And if any harm results on account of such activity, the enterprise must be absolutely liable to compensate for such harm, and it should be no answer to the enterprise to say that it had taken all reasonable care and that the harm occurred without negligence on its part. The court gave two reasons justifying the rule. Firstly, it said that the enterprise carrying on such hazard and inherently dangerous activity for private profit has a social obligation to compensate those suffering therefrom. As we can see that Union Carbide was a private industry, private sector industry, so it was liable to pay compensation to all those who have suffered. And secondly, the enterprise alone has the resources to discover and guard against such danger. Now the concept of vicarious liability. There may be certain circumstances when the liability of wrongdoer is imposed on person other than the wrongdoer himself, and a principal is liable for the wrongful acts of his agent done in the ordinary course of business, or a guardian is liable for the acts of his wards are some of the examples of vicarious liability. The doctrine of vicarious liability is based on the principle of respondent superior. I would like to repeat that the doctrine of vicarious liability is based on the principle of respondent superior. Now, according to Selman, there are such immense difficulties in the way of providing actual authority that unless some of such conclusive presumption is drawn, masters would make tools of their servants to commit great wrongs. A word, a gesture, or a tone from the master will be sufficient to induce a servant to commit greatest wrongs. Yet who could prove such a measure of complexity? Where a person is authorized by a master to commit or to fulfill an act, if he commits a wrong, then the master will be liable. The principle of vicarious liability is not covered under the criminal law because obviously it would not be justified to punish a person for an offense which was committed by someone else. And since, as we all know, that criminal law or criminal liability is related to the wrongful act committed in the society, whereas in civil wrongs, the interest of a private individual is involved. So, the principle of vicarious liability is commonly applicable to civil wrongs. So, there are some cases when a master is liable for his servant's wrongful act or omissions, and a principal is held liable for the wrongful acts of his agent for the following reasons. First, all acts done by a servant in and about his master's business are done by his master's expressed or implied authority. So, this point is related to the Salmon's definition, where he has stated that there must be express or implied authority given by a master to his servant to perform the act, and if the servant commits a crime or he commits a wrong, the master will be liable. The master is capable of bearing the financial burden of civil liability as compared with his servant. Since master reaps the benefit of servant's services, he should also bear the losses occasioned by the servant in course of his employment. It clearly says that when the master takes the benefit of services given to him by his servant, he should also be sharing the financial burden of the civil liability committed by his servant. The master is held liable for the wrongful acts of his servant on the principle of implied negligence. The law presumes that master failed to exercise due diligence in choosing a proper servant, therefore he should be liable for the consequences ensuing from the wrongs of his servant. It is very clear that the master should have due diligence or should have proper care while his or her servant performs such kind of act which may result into a wrong. And lastly, the principle of vicarious liability also extends to living representatives for the acts of the dead in certain cases. This is included in the Latin maxim Actio Personalis Moritur cum Persona. For example, where property belonging to the plaintiff has been appropriated by a person who has died, but he has included the property and the deceased to his own state. The plaintiff can sue the legal representative of the deceased for the recovery of such property. Now, a very famous case of P&O or Peninsular and Oriental Navigation Company versus the Secretary of State for India, 1861. Let's read what this case is all about. In the given case, the plaintiff's servant was traveling in a horse-driven carriage and he was driving through or passing by the dockyard, which was a government property. And in the dockyard, there were few servants working. They were carrying a heavy piece of equipments which were required for the repair of steamer. And by their carelessness, the equipments fall, and which frightened the horse. There and then the horse rushed forward and was injured. So the plaintiff filed a suit against the Secretary of State for India in council for damage which was caused due to the negligence of the servants employed by the Government of India. The court held that if the act was done in the exercise of sovereign functions, I would like to repeat that, if the act was done in the exercise of sovereign functions, the East India Company would not have been liable. But if the function was a non-sovereign one, that is, which could have been performed by a private individual without any delegation of power by the government, the company would have been liable. So here in this case, the company is not liable for the acts performed by the defendant's or company's servant. So I hope the concept of vicarious liability and strict liability were clear to all of you, and I hope this video might do some of your help in clearing the doubts regarding the concept of liability, kinds of liability, and mainly the concepts of vicarious liability, the case laws related to it, and the concept of strict liability, the case laws related to it. Thank you for being a patient listener. Happy learning.